Hey everybody, welcome to Q&A. So this week, Ma'am W writes, can you give tips on second interviews, please? Certainly I can, Ma'am W. In this video, we're going to be talking about how to prepare for a second interview. We're going to be talking about what the employer's thinking is and what their reasoning is when they bring you in for a second interview. We're going to be talking about the nature of the questions that they're likely to ask you in a second interview. I'm going to be giving some general tips, and we're going to be talking about the thank you email or the thank you note that you will be sending immediately after your second interview. Okay, so let's dive in. Actually, the number one takeaway here, okay, if you don't remember anything else from this video, remember this. Before your second interview, make sure you get a haircut, or else you run the risk of looking like a fool, okay? This is the current style. So if you end up looking like that, the world is your oyster. Let's put it that way. Okay. So let's dive in here. You've been asked to come in for a second job interview. Why is this? Well, there's two reasons. Number one reason is that you're going to be interviewing with the same person again. Okay, that's the most common situation. However, you might be called in to interview with a different person. Okay, so a new interviewer. If that's the case, it's going to be essentially a repeat of your first interview. Okay, however, for the rest of this video, I'm going to be assuming that you're interviewing with the same person again. Okay, so that's how we're going to proceed here. Now, you've been invited to a second job interview. What does this mean? Well, number one, you have passed 2 rounds of the recruitment and selection process, okay? There doesn't seem to be any obvious red flags with your technical skills, okay? If there had been, when you sent in your application with your resume, they would have never granted you a first interview. So that's what it's suggesting. There's no obvious red flags. You're technically capable of doing the job. You have the education and you have the experience. At least you have a good substitute for it. Put it that way, it's not a showstopper. It also suggests that because you passed the first job interview, that means that you have no obvious red flags in 4 key areas, okay? Your attitude is good, your social skills are good, your manners and protocol is good, and your likability is good, okay? So you're doing fine in all those 4 areas. Now, I don't mean you're doing great, I mean that you're passable in those 4 areas. That's all that it demonstrates if you're coming in for a second interview, okay? What you want is you want them to think that you're great in all 4 of those areas. So keep up what you're doing and see if you can take it to the next level on your second interview. Being likable is the number one most important thing that will get you selected. Okay, it will get you through the interview process and it will get you the job. Okay, being likable is the number one most important thing. So that's very, very important. You want to really focus on that. Okay, however, this time the employer is wanting to go deeper. They're going to want to get into more of the details. In the first interview, it might have been okay for you to say, yeah, I've got this, I've got that, I've done this for a few years, I've done that for a few years. That's fine. But in the second interview, this is where they'll want to get into the details. They'll want to verify that you are indeed the things that you say you are, and you have the things you say you have. They'll want to see you demonstrated by backing up your claims with examples, with stories, and things like this. So you're going to expect a lot of behavioral interview questions on your second interview, okay? Now, let's get into this. How to do well in your second interview. Okay. Like I said, the second interview is the same as the first interview. However, they're going to be going deeper. So you're going to be backing up what you say with more stories. Now, what this means is that you're going to have to rehearse more behavioral interview questions. Now, what I generally recommend, and what other people recommend too, generally speaking, is that you practice and rehearse, you memorize and rehearse approximately 10 stories from your past, okay? 5 shining moments, 5 failures, and you have these on the tip of your mind so that any behavioral type question they ask you, you won't be stumped by it and not know what to say. You'll have a story on the tip of your mind that pretty much illustrates that, okay? So what you're going to want to do now is you're going to want to add to these, okay? If you had 10 the first time, see if you can have at least 15 for the second. And if you're wondering what types of stories that you should have, what should they demonstrate? Well, go back to the original job posting and look at the mechanical requirements, what they're looking for in a candidate. Make sure that when you speak to each of those things, you can back it up with some kind of a story that demonstrates you have what you say you have, okay? That's very important. Now, take a breath. Now, the other thing they're going to be looking for in the second interview is they're going to want to probe a little bit deeper, and they want to get a feel for your values. I hate that word. I hate it with a passion. It sounds like a management buzzword, flavor of the month type thing. But this is what I mean, okay? Let me give you an example. Let's say you're up for a customer service type job, okay? And most jobs require you to make decisions on how you do your job. What do you prioritize? So for example, one organization that's looking for a customer service person, okay, they will prioritize people who put customer satisfaction number one. Okay, so they don't care how long you spend on the phone, more or less, as long as you end up with a customer who's completely satisfied. And when they put down that phone, they still love the company. Okay, that's their number one priority. Other organizations, they prioritize call volume. Okay, so they don't want you on the phone for a long period of time. They want you to handle as many calls as possible. Okay, so this is two different cultures, two different ways of thinking, two different priorities, two different values, okay? So one of the things that the interviewer is going to be prompting you for in the second interview is they're going to want to get more of a feel for your values. If you're up for the customer service job, they want to know what you would prioritize as number one. Now, this is tricky because there is really no right and wrong answer for this. Sure, you can take a guess as to what you think the interviewer wants to hear, but I don't know, unless you really have a clear idea. Personally, I wouldn't try and fake this, because if you do end up getting the job on some bogus answers, it probably won't work out anyway, and you'll be right back in this situation. So this is one of the things they're going to be looking for. Take your best shot. But there are no right or wrong answers. They're just looking for someone that fits in. And if ever you've been told, I'm sorry, you're not a fit for this job, if that isn't a complete smokescreen, that's usually what they're talking about when they say that, okay? Is that your values. Now, some general tips here, okay? One of the things you want to make sure you have is consistency. If they ask you the same questions that they asked you on the first interview, you don't want to have contradictory answers. Okay, you don't have to say necessarily exactly the same thing, but you don't want to say things that completely contradict each other. Because if you're interviewing with the same person, there's a good chance that they have some form of notes that say what the takeaway was from your answer, and those should probably jive, or else it's going to be a red flag. The other element of this is in every job interview, they're going to ask you, do you have any questions for us? Now, you don't want to ask the same questions again. Okay, this is very important, because if you do, it signals a bunch of negative things. It signals that you didn't listen the first time that they answered you, or you've forgotten that interview completely, which suggests it's not very important to you. Okay, so you're going to want to ask different questions. I've done an excellent video on the types of questions you could ask. Basically, there's a couple of types of questions. You could ask about the role, okay? Why is this role vacant? What are the duties of this role? That kind of thing. You could ask about the company. What is the culture of the company? What is the biggest challenge that the company is facing? How do they see this role? How does this fit within their vision? What are their long-term plans? And you could also ask about expectations. Okay, so if I were fortunate enough to be selected for this role, what would be your expectations of me 30 days after I started, 60 days after I started, 90 days after I started? What types of people tend to succeed in this role? What's the most important trait for someone to really excel in this role in your opinion? These are all the types of questions you could ask. Make sure you ask different questions than you did the first time. Okay? Take a breath. Okay. Now, I'm going on the assumption that everybody is preparing as well as they can for every job interview that they're doing. Okay? You're going to want to prepare as much or more for your second interview than you did for the first one. Don't let your guard down for the second interview. Okay, a common thing that I see a lot of candidates doing is they go into the second interview with a bit more of a casual attitude. It's a normal human reaction to think like, oh, I've got a good relationship with this person. You know, we're kind of buddies, and I'm gonna let my hair down, let my guard down, and we'll have more of an honest, open, kind of friendly, friend to friend kind of chat. Big mistake, okay? You want to be as formal and as professional as you were the first time around, because a lot of recruiters and interviewers will use that as a tactic to get you to drop your defenses, and that's when they ask the killer elimination questions like, what's your biggest weakness, or what's your biggest fault, or tell me a time about your biggest failure, things like this. And if your guard is down and you're not thinking diplomatically, shall we say, you can eliminate yourself quite easily. So always make sure that that you treat it as professionally and as formally as your first interview. Very important point. Okay, final point. The thank you email at the end of your second interview. It's very important that you send a thank you email or a thank you note of some kind immediately after your second interview, either the same day or at the very latest, the next day, okay, the following day. Why do I say this? Well, it's not because the thank you note in itself is going to give you a tremendous advantage. It's because you can assume that the other candidates that have also gone in for their second interview, your competitors in a way, they will have sent thank you notes, and you don't want to be the only individual that hasn't, okay? Very simple to do a thank you email or thank you note. Basically just thank you very much for the opportunity to interview with you. It was great having a glimpse into your organization again and meeting you again. Should you need any additional information, don't hesitate to ask. Once again, it's my privilege to interview. Thank you very much. Have yourself a great day. And then your name. Something like that. Just very simple, very straightforward. You should be doing this as a matter of course, and it's very important after your second interview. It's little things like that that can sometimes tip the scales, okay? So very important. So that's basically it. If you do all that stuff, and in every other respect, you treat it like your first interview, do all your preparation, you should be fine. I hope you found this video informative. Thank you very much for listening this long. You guys are awesome, and I'm talking to you especially. I hope you subscribe to my channel for more videos like this, and I will see you on the next one. Take care.